In the year 841, a fleet of longships rounded a bend in the river Liffey, and Ireland would never be the same. The Norsemen did not come to visit, they came to stay. What they built on that muddy riverbank would become one of the most feared and prosperous ports in the entire Viking world. A city built on plunder, forged in iron, and soaked in the wealth of an empire that stretched from Norway to North Africa. This is the story of Viking Dublin. Before the ships arrived, this was quiet land. Monasteries dotted the Irish coast, their round towers rising over green hills, home to scholars and scribes who had spent centuries copying sacred texts by candlelight. Ireland was a patchwork of small kingdoms, proud and fractured, forever fighting among themselves. It was rich in cattle, in silver, in monastic treasure, and utterly unprepared for what was coming from the sea. The Vikings had already been raiding the Irish coast for decades, striking monasteries in swift, brutal hit-and-run attacks. But in 841, something changed. Norse warriors under a chieftain remembered in the annals only as Thorgest established a long fort, a fortified ship camp at the mouth of the Liffey. This was no longer a raid, it was the beginning of settlement. But this was only the beginning of a far darker trade. Dublin's location was perfect, a sheltered tidal pool, a black pool in the old Irish tongue. Dublin gave the settlement its name. From here, ships could strike inland along the river, then vanish back to open sea before Irish kings could gather their armies. The Norse quickly turned Dublin into more than a base for raiding monasteries. It became the beating heart of the Viking slave trade, funneling captured Irish men, women, and children into markets as far away as Byzantium and the Islamic caliphates of Spain. The Irish did not accept this quietly. Kings rose and fell, fighting to drive the invaders back into the sea. In 902, a coalition of Irish forces finally succeeded, sacking Dublin and forcing its Norse rulers into exile across the water. For 15 years, the Black Pool sat abandoned, its docks silent. But the Vikings were not finished. In 917, they returned in force, retaking Dublin and rebuilding it stronger than before. This time, the city would not fall so easily. Under rulers like Sitric Silkbeard, Dublin transformed from a raiding camp into a true trading capital, one of the busiest ports in the Norse world. Merchants arrived with silver from Baghdad, silk from Byzantium, walrus ivory from Greenland. Dublin minted its own coins. Its shipyards built vessels that carried warriors and traders alike across the known world. Yet peace with the Irish kingdoms remained fragile, and ambition on both sides was growing toward a breaking point. As the 11th century dawned, one Irish king rose above all others, Brian Boru, a warrior who had clawed his way from a minor Munster dynasty to become High King of Ireland. Brian understood something his rivals did not. Dublin's wealth was too valuable to destroy. Better to control it, tax it, and bend it to Irish power. The tension between Norse Dublin and Brian's growing authority finally exploded in 1014 at a place called Clontarf, just outside the city walls. Norse warriors from Dublin, reinforced by allies from the Orkney Islands and the Isle of Man, faced Brian's coalition of Irish forces in one of the bloodiest battles Ireland had ever seen. Axes and swords clashed from dawn till dusk along the coastline, the tide itself becoming a weapon as retreating Norse ships were cut off from the shore.
By nightfall, the battlefield was silent. Brian Boru's forces had won a devastating victory, breaking Norse military dominance over Ireland forever. But victory came at a brutal cost. Brian himself, an old man by the standards of his age, was killed in his tent by a fleeing Norse warrior, even as his army claimed the field. The High King who united Ireland against the invaders did not live to see the peace he had won. Here is what most people never learn. Dublin itself was not destroyed after Clontarf. The Norse city survived, its Viking rulers submitting to Irish overlordship while continuing to trade, mint coins and grow. Excavations centuries later at Wood Quay would reveal layer upon layer of Viking Dublin preserved in the mud. Leather shoes, wooden combs, ship timbers, even children's toys frozen in time beneath the modern city. In the decades that followed, Dublin transformed again, evolving from a purely Norse stronghold into a mixed Norse-Irish trading city, its bloodlines and cultures merging into something new. Long after the Longships stopped arriving, that fusion would shape the city's character for centuries to come.
The legacy of those Norse founders never truly vanished. The street patterns of modern Dublin still trace the outlines of Viking lanes. Place names across the city, Leixlip, Hoath, and Dalkey, echo Old Norse words for Salmon Leap, Headland, and Thorned Island. Dublin's identity as Ireland's great port and gateway to the wider world was forged in those first long ships beaching on the Liffey more than 1,000 years before it became the capital we know today. What began as a camp for raiders became a bridge between worlds, connecting Ireland to Scandinavia, to the Mediterranean, to the far edges of the known earth. The black pool that gave the city its name is long since built over, but the city it created still bears the fingerprints of the Norsemen who refused to leave.